believe we're now back live. Thank you.
Yeah. Have we got the recording as well, or
just doing that?
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, we're good to go. Thank you.
Okay, over to you, Sergeant Ramirez, to carry on.
Okay, thank you. So yes, the main points to highlight from the footage are the issues that we had to assist in managing. Obviously, I've submitted a report from that evening, which details all the issues that we came across while we were at the event. I think it's worth noting that the police role in relation to these events generally would be to manage any impact on police resources. It's not our duty to be there monitoring the ins and outs of every aspect of an event. So generally, police wouldn't be in attendance. We may pop by, see how things are going from an outside perspective to see whether there's any impact in terms of issues in the surrounding area that aren't, that are in public areas that we can access. We wouldn't normally walk into an event. However, in 2018, myself and Sergeant May did enter the event and did look round, and we spent a significant amount of time there listening to how the event was being run. And as a result, you have hopefully read the report. I don't propose to read through the report as to what the issues were that night, but there were a number of issues. From that report, if I could just draw your attention to the photos that are within there, that show how narrow these lanes are. They are literally single track lanes, and how unsuitable it is really to hold an event in that location. I'm sure Guy McCallan, who I will ask to speak shortly, will tell you that this site has significant limitations in terms of access and egress. So it was following this event that we had the conversations in relation to numbers and camping, as I've explained, that my view at that point was that they shouldn't have more than 1,000 people attending in, in a capacity where they were trying to leave that same night. And it was something that they really needed to ensure they were managing better, because the numbers of people that were leaving on the road, walking in the dark, was significant. So following that event, let me just move forward. We had obviously the events in 2019. Now, obviously we like to have or need to have the plans in place in relation to the events with the event management plans. I started working with Mr. Wilkes in 2016 when I first joined this unit. And that was in relation to a application he'd put in at that point to let me just check, increase the number of events in 2016 to include the Back of Beyond event. So he'd gone from 2 events to 3 events. At that point, having looked at the license that he had at the time, there was very little on his license in terms of conditions. And I was concerned that actually we needed to ensure it was being managed correctly. I think up until that point, very little had been done from a police perspective, looking at how the events were being managed. So from that point on, we tried to work closely with Mr. Wilkes to get the event management plan up to date and of a standard. So I would say we've been working with him since 2016 in a close way, trying to guide him in terms of his event management plans and how they should be presented. And if you look at Annex 2 on his current licence, that will detail, or you'll be able to see from that, the extensive detail that's written within that annex in terms of his conditions to guide him as to the areas he should be covering. So he has had a lot of input, a lot of meetings with us to assist him. And I struggle to understand why, when we're nearly 5 years on, that he's still unable to complete and submit an event management plan without significant input from the police. And by significant input, I mean him essentially putting in an event management plan that we review, and he's looking for us to advise as to what needs to be added. Sorry, let me just find my place. So the police have a reasonable expectation that an event organiser should be able to produce, with the assistance of experts in certain fields, adequate event management plans for the running of a safe event with minimal input from the police. This to date has been something that Mr. Wilkes has been unable to achieve, despite being a person who has run events for a number of years. He's taken no responsibility for ensuring a thorough approach to identifying risks and managing those risks. He's been happy to cut corners unless pushed by the police to take necessary actions. Now, I say this because of the evidence that I've submitted over the past 2 years of the events that have run, where it has been the police that have constantly had to chase Mr. Wilkes for items that are missing, for areas that he hasn't covered, for conditions on his licence that he hasn't met, to ensure the safe running of events. It's his responsibility as an event organiser to ensure this is done. It shouldn't be for the police to check all the time that it is being done. I'm sure you can appreciate that we have numerous events, and if we had to put this level of effort into every event that's run in East Herts, we would have literally no time to do anything else other than check events. We have to have a level of trust and faith in those organisers that they will produce those documents to a good standard and that they will run their events to that standard. We as the police do not have that faith and that trust in Mr. Wilkes due to the previous experiences that we've had over the last few years. I'd like to refute the assertions made by Mr. Wilkes that the residents are informed and happy and take no issue. Having spoken to one of the residents myself yesterday, I can tell you that he was completely unaware of the application, as were other residents he is in contact with. He never walks past the location, as to walk there from his house would be too dangerous. He also does not purchase any local papers. So the expectation that residents would be aware of the application as a result of the current requirements under the Licensing Act to publicise the application is not a realistic one, bearing in mind the location of the event. Had Mr. Wilkes had the relationship that he indicates he has with local residents, you would think that Mr. Wilkes himself would have informed the residents of this application, but he has not. In fact, I am told that the resident I spoke to has not had contact with Mr. Wilkes for the last 5 years, which I find interesting, as Mr. Wilkes indicated during today's hearing that he spoke to residents that had issues following the 2019 Back of Beyond event. The resident I spoke to was one of these persons who put in a complaint. This is clearly not the case that Mr. Wilkes has spoken to them, because that was one of the people that I spoke to, and he was a complainant following the 2019 event. I'm also aware from this resident that there are numerous other residents who were completely unaware of the application, and as a result are in dismay today to find that this hearing is taking place, and they would have objected. There's a number of residents, I'm told, up to 10 potentially. They have actually forwarded to me today a number of emails which are in relation to objecting to this application. Mr. Wilkes has stated that he has a good working relationship with police. He has also spoken of the great relationships he has with local residents. Mr. Wilkes' actions over the years, and certainly in relation to the current application, indicate to me that this is a person who says he is willing to work with us, but in fact, he is not willing to unless forced. My stance since the application was submitted has been that the TTRO was just one of a number of key requirements that I spelt out during the application and my representation to the application. Mr. Wilkes refused to agree to this until the last moment, and now only does it in the hope that you might disregard the other key issues. In relation to events, it's all about managing risk and us having the faith and trust in those organisers to manage risks. This is not something we have with Mr. Wilkes. The police, as part of its checks and balances in ensuring an event can be run safely, requires the organisers to provide detailed plans and risk assessments that meet current legislative requirements and cover all aspects of the event and associated risks. As I've said, this is something that he's failed to supply to us previously. Therefore, I do not believe going forward that we would have those documents supplied to us in a timely way. He's failed to meet the condition on his licence that currently stands in relation to submitting those EMPs in a an adequate form 3 months before the event. That's not happened. Therefore, I have no reason to believe that that would happen going forward, as we've tried to work with him over the past 2 years to ensure that these are done in a timely way and that what's submitted is adequate. However, you'll see from the paperwork that I've submitted that time and time again we are having to chase for information, even though, as you will see from Annex 2, it's clearly detailed in there what he should be providing to police 3 months before. It literally lists all the appendices that should be included within an event management plan and gives a brief summary as to what areas that would need to cover. So my concern is that there's no conditions that would mitigate the risks that we're highlighting today, because there is clear concerns that he doesn't abide by those conditions. I feel that it is a risk to public safety, in relation to prevention of crime, disorder and public nuisance, that if this licence application is granted, there will be significant impact on the local residents, and there will be concerns around people's safety on the roads and in relation to crime, potential for crime and disorder. I just want to hand over to Guy McCallan, who has been in liaison with Mr Wilkes over the last few days. During Mr Wilkes's submissions, he spoke about the fact that it's been agreed a process by which the TTRO and the traffic management plan could be used. However, my understanding from speaking to Guy is there are still areas of concern in relation to this, so I will hand over to him to explain those concerns.
Good morning. The site presents challenges in terms of traffic management, some of which can be mitigated through the implementation of a traffic management plan. Initially this year, the plan appeared too generic and lacked sufficient detail and did not include the TTRO or traffic arrangements. I received a call from Mr Wilkes on Wednesday, as a result of where we had a conversation, and he agreed to implement a traffic management plan for this in line with that successfully used in 2019. I've explained and we discussed that traffic management plans tend to evolve for most events incrementally as a result of experience gained at each event. I've asked for details of any changes that may be necessary to cater for the different audience profiles for each of the events that he's got planned, and highlighted some specific concerns in relation to pedestrians. Clearly, the lack of a footway between the venue and a footway on the public highway network is a concern. And whilst I'm told the numbers of pedestrians that are walking along the roads are low, it doesn't negate the fact that having someone walking down an unlit road at night presents a risk. I've therefore suggested to Mr Wilkes that he explore if there is an opportunity to provide a safe off-road route between his venue and a footway on the public highway network. If that's not an option, and it may not be, he should explore with his traffic management provider whether a segregated pedestrian route can be provided within the carriageway, but that will be dependent on how much road width is available, and I suspect the cost may be prohibitive. We discussed what other options might be available, and I've suggested he should consider if it's practical to provide some minibuses or a minibus to pick up the relatively low numbers of people and convey them from his venue to a safe location, and to confirm where that safe location would be. I've discussed the event and the current plan with Hertfordshire County Council. They've got some concerns in relation to the frequency and number of events at this site, and they've told me that they now wish to speak to their legal department to just have an opinion about whether we ought to be looking, or they ought to be looking more deeply at this site in terms of, for example, a planning application, or if the current legislation is sufficient to enable them to produce a TRO for this event. So I think the bottom line is Mr Wilkes has undertaken in principle to provide a TM plan for this year in line with TM plans that have been used in the past. I would like to see a detailed TM plan for this year to include any necessary changes to cater for the different audience profiles, together with details of any pedestrian mitigation, which may be the off-road route, a segregated route in the highway, a minibus or anything else. In discussion with HCC yesterday, they've said, and I'm aware of, there are a number of other events planned in the area, and there are a number of HCC closures planned for works they've got on. These are normal everyday things, but they may impact on the timetable. I don't know whether the road space will be available to allow all of these events to go ahead should you grant the license, because there are other events and other works planned. So I think that is a brief overview. If you've got any questions, please ask.
Does anyone else from the responsible authority want to talk, Mrs. Manchado?
So I just wanted, Saab may well, I just wanted to kind of follow on in relation to what Guy has said. So thank you, Guy, for that information. You know, if we're looking at the application, in terms of the application that was submitted, Mr. Wilkes is experienced in knowing what would be required for such an application, yet he chose not to consult with Mr. McCallan or indeed Dave Morgan at HOTS Highways prior to submitting this. That's something that I feel, if you were a competent person who was looking to do this in the right way, you would do at the very beginning of your application, even prior to, which I think is suggested in the statement of licensing policy provided by the council. So I find it unbelievable that with the contact that he's had with David and Guy over the last few years, that's something he didn't do prior to putting the application in. I think those are the main things that I wanted to put. I will ask Saab whether she has any further comments she wishes to make. Saab?
You're on mute, we can't hear you.
No, that's absolutely fine. I think it's been covered.
Okay, nothing to add then. Right.
Okay, well, if the police have finished their submission, then there's a chance members and the applicant to put questions to them.
We'll start with members. Councillor Snowden, do you wish to start? Or have you got no questions?
No questions, quite clear, thank you.
No, thank you. Councillor Jones?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, thank you, Sergeant Ramirez, for that report. That's a pretty strong report, a pretty strong objection to this application that we can't, we certainly can't and shouldn't ignore. I'm just interested in, one of the comments you mentioned was about the number of attendees, the maximum number. And I think you mentioned that if it was in the region of 1,000 attendees only, you might consider that more acceptable than the proposed 1,500. So I'm just wondering, if we were likely to grant this application and obviously introduce conditions, I think what the police are saying, if it was 1,000 attendees maximum, if there was, obviously there's an issue with the traffic management plan, one for each event. I think that's come across quite strongly. The shuttle bus idea, I think that is something that the applicant might want to look at. And certainly the TTRO in place for every event. If those 4 conditions, I'm just suggesting, that's all, were in place, how would you consider that, Sergeant Ramirez? Or are you still strongly?
So I did notice that was written in the report. I'm not actually sure where that's come from, because it didn't come from myself in terms of stating that I would be agreeable to that. My concern all along has been that this is a large number of events running every other weekend. And I feel even by reducing the numbers going, that wouldn't relieve my concerns. But my bigger concern is what I've really tried to highlight in the meeting today, which is over the past 2 years, I say 2 years, it's sort of ignoring 2020, so over 2018 and 2019, we did have constant concerns in terms of trying to work with Mr. Wilkes to get the relevant information at the right time. And I feel that that is something we were struggling with in relation to the current events. To now look to run events every other weekend, I just feel is something that there is no way that Tom Wilkes would be able to provide the information to ensure the safe running. And the onus would be very much left on the police to try and ensure that his events are safe, because as we always do, we try to work with them. We try and engage to ensure that conditions are being met. We try to remind them of conditions as it is to ensure they're meeting them. But ultimately, it's not up to us to write the event management plan for them. They should be providing us with something that's adequate. And although conditions are very useful in terms of licenses, we have found that he's not sticking by the conditions he has. And in fact, he is, he has a condition, I believe, on his license currently, which is in relation to the event management plan, that wasn't being, agreed to or abided by, during 2019. I think I do need to correct myself. I believe I may have got confused with the numbers during the 2019 license. I actually believe, apologies, I have quoted, I just want to check my notes. I may have got confused. December 2019. Apologies. So the license that was in place during 2019 did actually authorise the numbers to be 4,950. I think I misquoted that and stated it authorised 3,000. So I do apologise for that. But actually, in relation to that year, the numbers, like I've said, wouldn't have gone anywhere near that 4,950, which is clearly what Mr. Wilkes has kind of stated in his submissions, that actually that's the number the site can cope with, but that has indeed not been proved to be the case in terms of the numbers that have been going. I think, so in terms of the event management plan, he had a condition during 2019 that stated he had to supply the traffic management plan, indeed, as part of his event management plan 3 months prior to the event. That wasn't done for Hogsosel event. I think I've highlighted that in the submissions. And then going forward into we are in 2019, and going forward, we had to push in relation to a number of aspects. I believe for the Back of Beyond event, it wasn't submitted 3 months in advance. It was certainly submitted late, and it puts a massive amount of pressure on the authorities to then look at it. So it isn't the case that at that 3 month mark, should he not have supplied it, that we say, right, that's it, no event. We actually end up then having to work with him to try and get it up to scratch. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of we haven't got the resources to do that for 12 events next year to carry Mr. Wilkes through, and we shouldn't be having to do that. So yes, it's sorry.
It's clear what you think we're talking about.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just correcting. 24 events we're looking at, aren't we? 12 weeks times.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. When I say 12, I'm talking about 12 weekends, 24 events. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Please hang up.
You will get your opportunity, Mr.
Oh,
Wilkes.
sorry, I've clicked the wrong button. Where am I?
Councillor Jones, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Right. Following on from that, on the number of events, do you want to comment on the number of events, Sergeant Ramirez, or not?
Sorry, in relation to the number of events?
Yes, applied for.
No. I was just confirming that, there was obviously 24 events over 12 weekends that are being applied for, which I think is too many.
Okay. And the other question I wanted to ask you, please, was about blue light access for emergency services. Do you want to comment on that? It wasn't mentioned in your submission, I don't think. I mean, it has been within the paperwork, but do you want to
so within the paperwork, you will see that some of the plans that have been submitted by Mr. Wilkes state that there's a blue route access. Our concern is that that access isn't kept sterile, and by that I mean free from other traffic or free from pedestrians if there's not a TTRO in place. Obviously, he's talking about now implementing that TTRO or essentially a traffic management plan, although I must add that he's looking at doing that for a very short period of time, only 4 hours over the event, so not starting till later in the evening with that TTRO. So it wouldn't be in place for the access, it would only be the egress that he's agreeing to. So yeah, in relation to the access, we have had an issue at the Wilkstock in 2018, where we were in fact called to the event on blue lights due to a fire extinguisher that went off, and it was a concern that it was some sort of terrorist attack at the time. This is in the 2018 report, that essentially the officers that were trying to drive there were very concerned about hitting people on the road as they were attending on blue lights. So that's in the 2018 report. Yeah, and also, sorry, there was one thing I just wanted to mention. No, it's gone from my mind. I can't think, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Wilkes. Oh.
Sorry, Chair, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Can we just maybe explore about the frequency of events a little bit more? I noticed, obviously, Sergeant Ramirez said 24 events are too much. Do the police have a sort of a marker in how many they think that would be more acceptable?
So I think my concerns, without wanting to repeat them, are in relation to Mr. Wilkes being able to manage these events. At the moment, his current licence stands, and therefore he could hold events under his current licence on 3 weekends over next year. So based on that, he already has those events. I don't see that adding any more. I appreciate he's saying he's not going to use that licence, but he's already got that licence. I don't see that I would want to go to any more than 3 events, so 3 weekends, which is what he currently has. And, in relation to that, we will, based on the information we've pulled together, have to take a view on how, going forward, his current licence and whether it should remain in place or whether that needs to be looked at as well, based on the information from the last 2018-2019 events. And just in relation, the one thing that I did want to mention, in relation to officers being on site, Mr. Wilkes has mentioned this. So the only time that we've had officers on site was in 2018, Back of Beyond, when it was myself. And then the following year, Back of Beyond in 2019, we had an officer, Dean Perrott, on site, which I've included his summary. I just want to say that in relation to Dean Perrott, he would have been looking at that very much from a police resourcing point of view as to the impact that it may have on police resources. He wouldn't have been fully versed in terms of the licensing conditions and obviously the very intricate details that myself and my team look at. So that's not something he would have been trying to sort of fulfill and look at during that time. He also would have spent the majority of his time in the event liaison team office, which is basically a cabin on the outskirts of the event. He doesn't go into the event, he just listens to the radio, and occasionally would walk around the perimeter to sort of look into the event to see how it's going. He wouldn't necessarily walk down the access roads, going in and out to see what was going on there. However, he was aware of the concern around people walking away from the event. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point because I don't want it to seem like police have monitored this, every hour of every day of every event, because that certainly isn't the case. We don't have the resources to do that. So I don't want the lack of information on other events to cause a concern. As I said, if we were to sit and monitor every single event, we would be spending an awful lot of time doing it.
Thank you, Officer. Mr. Wilkes, now's your opportunity to ask questions of the responsible authority. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Claire, thanks for your comments. I've definitely taken them all on board, and yeah, I understand most of the comments obviously relating to 2018's event, which we had a post meeting about previous to any 2018 event, when we have hosted up to 3,000 people. My apologies, I said 4,000. It's actually up to 3,000 people, and exited 2,000 people from the site without a TTRO in place and a traffic management plan without an issue. I just want to reiterate that back to that prior to 2018's essentially problem event, which we did have some issues around, which Claire has rightly brought up. Previous to that, we have had 3,000 people on site, not 4,000 as I mentioned, and we did exit 2,000 people without a TTRO in place, and quite successfully. So it has been proven in not just in 2017, prior to that, 2016, 2015, all those years before, and not had an issue. So again, I really bringing the CCTV footage is very important. Something that got brought up after 2018, but was never actually. I've only seen it, which was dropped to me 2 days ago. So I haven't seen that. Sorry, I have seen that now. I've reviewed it, and obviously that's 2018 footage that I can't see. Obviously, there was some issues there, and I completely appreciate that. And we went to a post meeting about that event, and we agreed certain conditions with Claire and the police and herself to get conditions on the license, which mitigated the problems in a very open way. But the license was never brought under review. The problems of certified chaos, again, my opinion towards Claire's is obviously differed. What I see as chaos, she might not see as chaos, or vice versa. And from that video, I can't see chaos. I can see a dark car park for sure, and I can see an incompetent security company, which we very openly admitted to was the main issue at that 2018 event. Since that 2018 event, that security company have not been used. If you listen to the audio on that CCTV footage, it is clear that the police actually say that as well. So they agree with what I'm saying, is that we've got incompetent security here, and we admit that, and we've never used them after that. What is actually comes out of that CCTV footage as well? She's there, or they're there at 12 o'clock managing, and they are literally 30 meters within a full festival that's going on, and you cannot hear the music.
Just briefly interject.
Yes.
This is actually meant to be questions to the police. So if you have
sorry, sorry, I misinterpreted that, and I've got notes. So I'm just going through them. So do you want me to go through the notes later, and do you want me to ask questions to Claire now? Is that what you're saying?
If you have questions of Claire and the evidence that she's presented,
yes,
that's where we're supposed to be. So
my apologies. Yeah. My apologies. Okay, well let's move on to that. I've got some written down here. As I just stated, there was a mistake on the 4,000 to 3,000. We have made a mistake there. Getting back to the TM and TTRO, that was that Claire said that we only approached yesterday or the day before. We've been trying to liaise with the police since the 29th or whenever it came back to us. I think it was the 15th, 16th of November regarding this, and trying to come to compromises and try to speak to them about this. We've literally had not our normal correspondence back, and we haven't been able to get much from them. We've been passed around the police, and it has obviously come back to Claire, which she does have good experience of the event. So Claire, I'd like to say the only reason it was brought up yesterday for a TM management situation was because I was under the impression that we didn't need one for 1,500 people. So on what statement is it based that a TTR is needed for under 1,500 people?
I'm not sure what the question is, but I think we've always said since that 2018 issue that actually the traffic management needed to be looked at. You had numerous meetings following that event where it was discussed in terms of the event management plan and the traffic management plan being put in place for 2019. So I think you're fully aware of the issues that we've highlighted on a number of occasions, and my expectation from that would be that if you're looking to hold events there, you would always consult and look at that process being
Yes.
put in place.
Okay, well, I just had to clear that up, that I didn't consult Guy on that issue, because I was under the impression that I have been since 2019, as we run Hogsozzle was under 1,500 people, that we didn't need a TTRO, hence why Guy and David have not been contacted. It's not out of me just not wanting to contact them. I was already under the impression, and that's why we went in for 1,500 people, because we know that we've had an agreement between us, okay, that we didn't need a TTRO to satisfy 1,500 people. That's the only reason we're on 1,500 people, because we didn't want to put in a TTRO and disturb these areas of the road. And I get what you're saying. I take what
Mr. Wilkes, we
Guy's
take
now
your
said.
point here. We take your point, but we're going questions now. So have you got any other questions for the response?
Yes. So let me just see if. Am I allowed to reference to Eric here and bring Eric in for Eric? Eric, can you sorry, I'm just going through the notes. On the, what they said, there's going to be crime and prevention through walking up and down the streets, Claire, at night. Is there any evidence to back that there has been crime and disorder in this area? Is there any reports of crime and disorder happening within 12 years on this street, or any reports that can back that up?
Okay, so there is certainly the issue in terms of disorder, as you've seen from residents who have stated they've been disturbed, and it's been causing them issues. Essentially, what I'd like to say in relation to that is, managing events is about looking at risks and managing those risks. It's not just about assuming that because you've had no issues for 12 years that there'll be no issues going forward. It's about looking at those risks and managing them appropriately.
But there is no actual reports saying there's any crime and disorder happened on these streets within 12 years.
Chairman, I think Brad was trying to come in briefly there.
Yeah, I was aware that. I was just waiting for Mr. Wilkes to finish with his question. Is it about this point though, Brad?
Yeah, it's just, ultimately this is questions for Claire. Sorry, I thought you was asking your security guy a question then, so that's why I interjected.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm just getting back to, is there evidence that Claire can say that we have had crime and disorder in this area and reported?
And that was just answered, I believe, by the officer.
Okay, so we haven't got any.
Well,
okay.
There was disorder against the residents. I think that was the response, wasn't it? That's what I've made a note of. Is there anything else?
There's no. Okay.
No, there's nothing further.
Getting back to the other licensing objective, so public nuisance. So what we've obviously opposed for is less stages, less noise, less people, and less hours. So
is this a question?
Yes. Are the 3 complaints the only complaints that you've received?
So those are the complaints that I had on file from the end of the 2019 event. Since then, I have had a number of emails sent to me from, I believe, approximately.
But against, I'm talking
no,
about
Mr.
against.
Wilkes, you've asked a question.
Sorry.
You have to let the officer reply, and then you can ask another one. All right, thank you.
I've had emails this morning from, I'm just counting how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can see certainly 8 emails this morning from residents, all of which are in objection because they were unaware of the application.
Thank you. Right, Mr. Wilkes, your next question.
I understand that. When Claire has said that I haven't contacted any of these people, I have spoken to a lot of them in the past and after many of the events. I've just gone through the normal procedure of.
Is this a question?
Event.
Sorry, this is what we're doing. We've got to follow the rules.
Sorry, I'm not
you
really
and
good at
everyone
the question bit. Okay, not question there. Can I just run through my notes quickly, just make sure there's any others?
Yeah,
Sorry, I
have a
appreciate
look, but you don't need to read them out loud. Thank you.
Yeah, whilst Tom's looking through his notes, can I ask a couple of questions on his behalf? Thank you. Firstly, procedurally, can anybody tell me, and it's not just for Claire, but Claire primarily, there have been suggestions that the residents weren't aware of this. Has there been any breach of procedure in the application that Mr. Wilkes has submitted?
Okay, I can answer that. There has been no breach in procedure.
So effectively, he has complied with the requirements of the law.
The requirements of Licence Act 2003, yes.
Thanks very much. And I just want to bottom out the question for Claire. Are there any records of crime or calls to police via 999 or 111 in the previous 12 years in relation to crime or disorder or public disorder for these events?
I wouldn't be able to comment in relation to the last 12 years because it's not something I have gone back specifically over. Over the last number of years, there's not been any reported crimes. We were called, I think I mentioned it, to the 2018
the fire extinguisher, yeah.
Yeah, following a fire extinguisher going off. I don't believe, other than that, we have been called. Obviously, I was present at the 2018 Back and Beyond event, and I requested further resources to come and assist with the issues that we were dealing with at the front because the security and the plans that were in place weren't sufficient to manage what was happening.
And one final one for now for me, while Tom just gets his final questions ready. If all the events that you've shown on video and that have been referred to so far relate to 2018 and the previous security company, that we know that lighting's been improved down there. There's been a new security company who I know very well and have worked with for 15 years and now in place. If the concerns of 2018 were so great, was there consideration into calling the licence into review at that stage? And if it was called into review, what was the outcome?
Yeah, it's certainly something that we considered after the issues of 2018. However, we had meetings with Mr. Wilkes where he reassured us in relation to the management of the event going forwards. And so we felt that it was the correct way to proceed, that we would try to work with Mr. Wilkes again over the 2019 period. During that period, I was actually on maternity leave. Obviously, I've come back at the beginning of 2020 into the COVID pandemic. And I have to be honest, I haven't had the opportunity, or hadn't until recently had the opportunity to sit down and review what had happened during the 2019 events. My hand has been forced in terms of reviewing that because of this current application. And based on that review, which has taken a significant amount of time to go through all the correspondence from the years, I am minded that actually his current licence may need to be reviewed on the back of the information we have. In relation to you and obviously the fact that you're the security company now, my understanding is that you stepped in. You're not the security company. No.
Stuart Matthews, who's on the screen, is the security manager. I'm an independent event and crowd safety manager.
Oh, okay. Can I just ask when you were instructed? Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I was saying I think that's a matter of commercial sensitivity. My review at this stage has been merely of the paperwork submissions, but the client will decide whether or not to discuss how long I've been engaged for.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yes.
So over 12 years, you've said, or maybe not 12 years, but you've said that I'm incompetent to run safe events. Can you relay any information or any reports or hospital admissions or people that have been injured against me in 12 years of doing events here and nearly 100,000 people, with many events each year? I mean, I think it's a little bit harsh to call me incompetent if there is no evidence to back this up, unless you have got evidence.
The question is there evidence?
Is there evidence? Yeah, please.
I believe I've supplied evidence throughout in terms of the events that have been held in 2018 and 2019. There's plenty of evidence within those documents that I've supplied that evidence the incompetent way that these events have been managed, and the concerns that have resulted in relation to that, and the breaches of licenses, and the fact that security company pulled out the last minute before the 2019 Wilkstock event, and was replaced with another company due to their concerns. So I think there's plenty of evidence within the documents that I've provided to evidence that.
But after 2018, or we understand 2018 has been a problem, is there any evidence that it hasn't run in a safe manner, or had any evidence that there's been an accident, or blue lights have been called, or ambulances have been called? Is there any evidence that backs that up? But you can say it, but I need to see what has happened. I mean,
I think this is this is the point where we I don't know, we want to use the word conflict, but differ, Tom. My view is about having an event that is planned, organised, and is managing all possible identified risks. If you're asking me if you do that, no, I don't believe you do. If you're asking me, have your events had any issues? No, but that doesn't mean that going forward you won't, because you're not managing the issues.
Sorry, can I just intervene? There is a note when you said, has there been any...
Could we see you while you're talking, please?
Sorry, yes. Sorry. You mentioned whether there's been any calls made during the events. In September 2019, there was a call of sexual assault recorded. Just want to go back to that point.
That's the only call made in 12 years.
We're not in 12 years. The last couple of years.
So there is more calls being made, or just that one?
So Tom, as we've explained, we've not gone back over the last 12 years. I'm sure you appreciate our time has been massively limited in terms of being able to deal with this application over a COVID period, over a Christmas period. So we have done our best to supply the information from the last few years to show the current situation. Yeah.
Okay.
And we will take that into consideration when we're considering our decision.
Yep.
Thank you. Have you got any more questions, Mr. Wilkes?
I've got no more questions, but I've got some notes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there are no more actual questions, there is the chance for all parties to sum up if they wish.
Right. Yes. Thank you very much. They will be taken as the responsible authority will sum up first, and then Mr. Wilkes, you get your opportunity to have your closing statement last, so you'll have the last word on it before we retire. Is that clear? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't propose to do a long speech. I think the points that I've tried to make over this hearing and as part of the submissions that we've made are clear, in that we have grave concerns about the ability of the organiser to plan and prepare, manage risk in relation to these events. And I don't propose to go over all of that again. So I think the position of the police is clear that we don't feel this application should be granted. We do not feel that putting conditions on the licence will mitigate the concerns raised. And I say that based on the evidence we've submitted about conditions not being applied and complied with. So, you know, it is the submission of the police that this application should be refused based on the licensing objectives of public nuisance, prevention of crime and disorder, and in relation to, I'm sorry, the last one, public nuisance, crime disorder.
Public safety.
And public safety. It's completely escaped my head. Sorry, it's been a long morning. But that's all I wish to say. Thank you.
Thank you, officer. Right, Mr. Wilkes, it's your opportunity to sum up and do a closing statement.
Okay, so just running through, I've obviously making a few rough notes what Claire has said. The footage shown of the CCTV, we've been through that, is a 2018 event. Post-event, we rectified the issues, and there's not been any issues since. There is no significant representations except the police, and we've I believe we've mitigated a lot of those. I understand where Claire's coming from on a little bit of tit for tat on application timings and our conditions in our original license, and some of the EMPs, I must admit, have been late, but we're not talking about all of them. We're talking about one or two in the past 12 years. I've actually had a meeting with Oliver a year ago about this license and about all these conditions in there, and he himself believes that it's very confusing, and we've tried to simplify it in good time. There's over 70 conditions in there, and I think going forward it'd be a lot better to have a one date through everything, or even if it's slightly earlier than a 3-month plan. So it does give everyone a bit more time to review these documents. So there isn't this tit for tat, or you submitted it 3 days late, or it was 3 days early, or this needed to be submitted 2.5 days earlier.
Just summing up, please, Mr. Wilt.
So my point, obviously, just getting back to Claire's points on those, I've sort of looked at the time spent on Claire's representation there, and actually gone through her representation in great detail. The representation was actually submitted formally to this application, and I think about 80–90% of it relates to a 2018 event, which I completely understand. That is the only time she has been present at, I believe, at an event here, and that subsequently is one of the only event that went not so well. We've rectified the issues in 2019 for many events of a lot larger proportion than what we're putting forward. What we're putting forward is not a DJ event every weekend. It's 60% family based. It's cinemas. It's musicals. It's not a DJ event which everyone doesn't sometimes get along with. We've massively separated it, and hopefully that pleases the wider community. We're in desperation of events in 2021. We can't do anything else. We've got a perfect venue here to do it with. We've got a proven track record. Claire definitely disagrees with the track record on a paperwork side of things, but when it comes down to it, there's no actual evidence to back up hospital submissions, crime and disorder. I agree what she's saying with some of them need to be looked at, but there's no strong evidence that this application would increase that. We're dropping the amount of numbers we get into the venue. We're dropping the amount of time, licensable time here, and we're also dropping the amount of noise. I don't see that it's any different from the license we've already had and had quite successfully for 2019. We've said that we can deal with the traffic management for up to 2,000 people exiting at the same time. This is only for 1,500 people, up to 1,500 people. Some of the events are only going to be 500, 700. We're not talking about a huge amount of people, but we're very willing to work with the police, get these conditions lined out, and have safe events. Even if it's a way of saying, run an event, like I've said, for the first one for 500 people, then the second one for 1,000, and then up it so we can gauge how it's going, and then see from there. If there's a way to put that condition in there, we'd be happy with that. I don't see that this license is detrimental to the local community. It's an asset, and it does not undermine crime and disorder because there's no evidence. Public safety, I don't agree. And I would like to say we're trying to provide for the community. We're good people, and we're local, and we're trying to provide for the wider community in a very, very difficult year. And that we're just trying to adapt. We're not trying to change everything. We're just trying to adapt to 2021, and that's all we're trying to do, is provide safe events for everyone. Eric, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you've covered it all there, Tom. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Wilts. Are you done?
Thank you. Thanks for everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it's now time for a
Right.
break.
Brad, you're going to move us into a breakout room?
Yeah, basically everyone's going to go into a separate breakout room into groups. So ultimately the 3 members will be going with the legal officer and the democratic services officer of groups, the police in one room and the applicant in a separate room. Okay, so 3, 2, 1.
Just like magic.
If you can all click join, please.
still on live on YouTube, so we need, Brad, can you bring all the other parties in, please? Everyone not talking, go on mute, please.
I go on, yeah, we can go on mute.
Of closed rooms, they'll be closing 30 seconds.
Okay, we got everyone on that needs to be on.
I know a couple of the applicant's representatives are no longer.
Mr. Wilkes, do we need to wait for any of your colleagues to come on?
Eric's has had to leave. Stuart is there if we need him, but Brittany should be dialing in now.
Hopefully. Oh, she's here. I can see her.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so we've got everyone we need then. Great, thank you. Right. The subcommittee members have listened to the comments of the Senior Licensing and Enforcement Officer, the applicant, and the police as the responsible authority. The subcommittee has significant concerns over the serious issues raised by the police as the responsible authority regarding historic events and the ability of the applicant to run a responsible event. The subcommittee are sympathetic to the applicant's wish to hold entertainment events to support the community. The subcommittee, right, I'm down too far. The subcommittee have considered possible conditions, but could not identify any that were appropriate and proportionate to mitigate the concerns of the police and to ensure that the following licensing objectives would not be undermined: prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, and prevention of public nuisance. The application is therefore refused. This decision will be sent in writing, and there is the right of appeal within 21 days from the receipt of letter to the Magistrates' Court. Right. So moving on to item 8, any urgent business? No urgent business. In that case, declare the meeting closed. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you. The meeting's closed at 5 to 1.